Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my latest video. I'm going to be wrapping up my series where I'm speaking about players for you to target late in your fantasy football drafts, and I'm going to be wrapping that up with the oh-so-lovely tight end position. Before I dive into this, I'm going to be honest with you guys. I typically try to target one of the elite to great tight ends in fantasy football just because it's such a volatile position. I'd rather just draft a tight end that I can just put in that lineup and just bet that he's going to have more ceiling games and floor games throughout the season. But if I do miss out on one of those tight ends I like, and I really don't like the people that are the tight ends that are considered tight end ones in their ADP, I am willing to wait towards the back end of the draft and maybe draft a tight end that has a high ceiling, or draft a tight end that I believe at least can give me a high floor to start my season, while I keep an eye on the waivers and maybe try to find a breakout tight end to get into my lineup. With that being said, I got about three high floor tight ends and two potential high ceiling tight ends on this list. One last note before I talk about the first player. The tight ends I am speaking about, they have to be outside the ADP in half-point PPR and Fantasy Pros of the top 12 tight ends. So in 12-team leagues, these tight ends are going as tight end 2s, and this is as of July 23rd, just in case anybody watches this video in a few days, a week, or 2 weeks from now, because with training camps being officially getting kicked off this week, I totally expect all these ADPs to be fluctuating over this next month or so. So let's go ahead, dive into the first player. My first tight end I'm going to talk about, I am going to go with the Isaiah Likely, the tight end 2 for the Baltimore Ravens. And just dive into some really quick stats with him. Since 2021, among tight ends only, he's tied for the 7th most receiving broken tackles. I know that doesn't mean much in fantasy football, but that is a good positive thing. That means he's picking up those extra yards, which gets you those little extra points for your team. Now, in his first 2 seasons in the league, in each season, he has at least gotten 40 targets, 30 receptions, 370 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Not really eye-popping stats, but you got to factor in that he's been playing with Mark Andrews, who's the tight end 1 in that offense. But just like we saw last year when Mark Andrews got sidelined with his injury, all of a sudden Isaiah Likely became fantasy relevant, and he became a high ceiling type of tight end for you to put into your lineup with him out there. Now, that's why I do like him. That's why he's on my list, is just because I've actually liked what he's shown. Even when Andrews has been playing with him, he has had his flashes, and like I mentioned, he did seize the moment when he had the opportunity to be the tight end 1 in the offense. So if for any reason Mark Andrews got hurt again this year, all of a sudden you got a tight end 1 that you could put into your lineup if you want to stash Likely on your bench. But I still think with Andrews back, he's going to be able to provide value. I'm not the biggest fan of the Baltimore Ravens receiving corps. I do like Zay Flowers. He's probably good. Him and Andrews are going to battle for the most targets week in and week out. But other than that, it's Rashad Bateman, who has not proven himself quite yet. And then you got Nelson Aguilar, who's an up and down wide receiver. So even with Andrews in the lineup, I think you're going to see games where Likely has the 3rd most targets in the offense, and who knows, just because of how well Likely provided value to Baltimore last year, I could see them utilizing Andrews and Likely throughout the season together. Now, I don't know if you want to draft Likely to be your tight end to start the season. He might be a guy that you draft, you stash him, maybe you go with one of these high floor players I'm going to be speaking about today, and then if Likely proves that he can provide you value with Andrews in the lineup, you can start sliding him in. We've seen this in the past where teams have had 2 tight ends, like the Eagles did a few years ago with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, where both of them are worth they're both rosterable for fantasy rosters. So if you are looking for a ceiling type of tight end towards the back end of your draft, Likely is a name for you to consider. Moving into the next guy in my list, I'm going to go with Pat Freiermuth. Since 2021, he is tied for the 4th most receiving broken tackles, and he's actually tied for the 9th most receiving touchdowns among all tight ends in the last 3 years. Now, some other stats with him. In his first 2 seasons, he received at least in each of the first 2 seasons 79 targets, 60 plus receptions, 495 plus receiving yards, and 2 plus touchdowns. His rookie year, he actually got 7 touchdowns. And last year was a little bit of a letdown just because of his injuries that he had a battle with. He only appeared in 12 games last year. I'm expecting a bounce back performance for Pat Freiermuth with the Steelers. And then looking at why I like Freiermuth is I like him because I view him as a high floor tight end, but I also think he's got a high ceiling for him this season, and that's because he has a open path to have the second most targets in this Pittsburgh offense. I totally expect George Pickens to lead the team in targets this season, but unless they go out and trade for a Brandon Ayuk or another different veteran wide receiver to add to their offense, I think he's going to have by the end of the season the second most targets on this team, which is why I think he's going to give you a steady high floor, and then he has that potential high ceiling because of what we saw that he did as a rookie, and I can see him repeating that. I can see him getting close to double-digit touchdowns in this offense. Moving on to the next player, this is another guy I'm viewing as a high ceiling potential player at the tight end position for fantasy football this year. It's going to be Luke Musgrave, the second-year tight end for the Packers. As a rookie, he had 46 targets, 34 receptions for 352 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, that was only in 11 games because he got hurt and he got placed on IR. He came back the last week. He only got like 1 catch, but he did do. He got that I think he got a touchdown and did some damage against the Cowboys or the Niners. I couldn't remember exactly that playoff game, but regardless, I really like what I saw from Luke Musgrave within the Packers offense. I know Matt LaFleur loves to utilize his tight ends, and I think you're going to see him take the next step in year 2. Now I will say this: there is a competition for targets within this offense. The Packers got a number of wide receivers that are going to need to be fed. His fellow draft classmate Tucker Kraft, he will be pushing for his role within the offense, but he's starting training camp on the PUP list. So if he does miss most of the training camp, this does give Luke Musgrave an opportunity to continue to develop that chemistry with Jordan Love. And the reason why I keep on saying this is I view him as a high end player because he did average 10.4 yards per reception. That's a first down every catch. That's basically a point for you on every catch, and then, well, actually a point and a half or 2 points if you're in full PPR leagues. And I think he's going to be eventually the number 1 tight end in the offense. Maybe doesn't provide you great value at the beginning of the season, but then I can see him being that week in and week out starter that gives you some high end weeks throughout the season. Moving into this next tight end, Tyler Conklin. This is a high floor option for me, but I kind of see him potentially being a high ceiling depending on the week. Now, looking at what he's done since 2021, he's tied for the 8th most receptions, and he has the 9th most yards after the catch among tight ends over the last 3 years. Now, looking at some other stats with him, he's played with the Jets the last 2 years. In each of these last 2 seasons with New York, he's gotten at least 87 targets. He's gotten at least 58 receptions and 550 receiving yards in each of those seasons. Now, if you include his last season with the Minnesota Vikings 3 years ago, he actually has 3 straight seasons. He's gotten 87 targets. Now, like I mentioned, he's a high floor option, but the reason why I see him potentially being a high ceiling is he's going to be a steady contributor in this offense. And then depending on when Mike Williams is available, I'm not sure if he's going to be available at the beginning of the season because he is coming off that torn ACL. Plus, we do know Mike Williams gets banged up. He is prone to miss games. And if Mike Williams is not within the offense, I can actually see games where Conklin has the second most targets behind Garrett Wilson in that offense. And obviously the biggest factor with him is he's going to have Aaron Rodgers back this season. So I think that actually not only raises his floor that he already has shown no matter who's his quarterback is, but it's also raising his ceiling too as a fantasy tight end. And that's why I think he could potentially be a steal for people where you don't have to spend that high draft capital on the tight end position, and you get that steady player out of Conklin who's going to give you those ceiling games throughout the year. Wrapping up this list, I'm going with a tight end here in Tampa Bay for the Buccaneers. I'm going with Cade Otton. In his first 2 seasons as a pro, he's finished with at least 65 targets. He's gotten at least 42 receptions, 390 receiving yards, and at least 4 touchdowns, which is a very positive thing to see out of a young tight end. Which is why I do view him as a high floor tight end option for you entering the year. Now, obviously, I would expect Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to dominate the targets. They do have some other receivers in this offense that may get the third most targets, but I do think there's going to be games where Cade Otton has the third most targets in this passing attack. I kind of view him like, say you wanted to maybe bet on Isaiah Likely being your ceiling tight end. If you were to draft 2 tight ends late in your draft and not try to draft one very high and just address other positions, I can see him being a supplemental tight end to start your season. And then if Likely blows up, or maybe if there's a tight end on the waivers to emerge, maybe then you replace Otton with a high ceiling type of tight end. But who knows? This is his 3rd year. He could have a true breakout season and become that week in and week out starter that you could rely on, which is why he did make my list. So yeah, that wraps up my players to target late in your drafts at the tight end position. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to all my channels. You can find me on X, Twitter, wherever you want to call it. I got my YouTube channel. I'm on TikTok. I do post the links to my videos on my Instagram. I have a link tree on my Twitter if you want to make sure you do follow me on all my platforms. Next video I'm going to do, I am going to do a video on kickers, because that did very well for, seems like a lot of people enjoyed that video, especially on my YouTube channel last year. So I'm going to go ahead and speak about that. That will probably come out here this Saturday, this weekend. I may get one more video for you guys by next Tuesday. Other than that, I will be MIA. I got a great friend's wedding next week, so you guys, after this next video, you might not get one from me until I return the following week, and then that's when I'm gonna give you guys all my rankings / tier list for the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end position. But if you guys have any questions, if you got drafts coming up soon, you want to hear how I feel, you can get into a DM, you can get into a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Other than that, I'm gonna hop off here. Hope you guys enjoy your day, your night, your evening, your week, your weekend, whenever you're watching this. Peace out.